everyone, and welcome to Head, a design podcast for Dungeons & Destiny. We are on episode 2, and I am Good Game Kitty. I am the lead designer and creator of Dungeons & Destiny.
I'm Martin, the editor and lead writer for Dungeons & Destiny.
And I'm Baxter, the founder of the Ishtar Collective.
And like I said before, we're here to talk design stuff because this is a design podcast. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the creatures in the Destiny universe. And if you haven't listened to our first episode, I'm going to recommend that you go back and do that because that's where we explain the whole CR system and how we're actually ranking all of these monsters. But the TLDR is we have a chart here that we're looking at, that we have all of the monsters from the Destiny universe on this chart. And we are going to be assigning a number to them that determines just how badly this monster can mess you up.
Woof.
But let's go over real quick where we left off last time. We had started talking about the Fallen, and we had ranked, dregs, shanks, and wretches at the bottom of the list. And then moving up from there, we talked about vandals, marauders versus sniper vandals, servitors, fallen captains, who are currently acting as our anchor monster. And then we had finished up with Archon and Kel. Did we finish on Archon and Kel? Or were we still iffy on where we place them?
We ended up settling on where those monsters should be in sort of a baseline way, but in both cases there was some discussion about the possibility of individual Archons or Kels that, architects might create based on the default stat blocks. How those might want to be bumped probably up, but, up or down depending on custom needs. Because those are both very individual characters when they actually appear. So I think those might have felt a little uncertain because there was the question of, what is the default value for these kinds of fallen versus what aren't these each, very distinct individuals when they actually show up.
Yeah, and we had talked a little bit about the macro view versus the micro view, where you have Archon as a stat block is the macro level of it. It is the sum of all Archons, the average Archon. And then you would have individuals with their own unique abilities or strengths and weaknesses. So I have here Archons were CR7 majors and Kels are CR9 ultras.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the next monsters on our list, I don't know if they're separate monsters, though. I'm going to leave that to the lore dudes to figure that out. But the Prime Servitor and the Pilot Servitor.
They're separate monsters.
Yeah, I think they are separate. The Pilot Servitors would be used to pilot the catches.
Yeah.
Whereas the Prime Servitor is the highest kind of, a rank might not make sense in terms of servitors, but it's the highest rank of servitor in a house.
Well, I was asking the question if they were separate because I think it was in Destiny 1 Prison of Elders, you fought a pilot servitor that was the size and basically damage of a prime servitor, Sepix Prime.
Mm-hmm.
They are comparably sized orbs. And as combatants, they may have very similar capabilities, even though they're quite distinct as types.
Yeah, with the Fallen and the state that they are in, I do wonder if there are pilot servitors that are treated better than their rank would imply because there are so few servitors left,
Yeah, remember there was a Prison of Elders fight with a servitor boss that was in fact like a refurbished pilot servitor that was being upgraded into a resurrected prime servitor by its crew, all of whom were imprisoned with it.
Calyx Reborn, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that goes to what really is the essential difference between a prime servitor and a pilot servitor, which is the programming.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This actually sounds that this is probably going to be similar to our Vandal and Sniper Vandal situation. where
Yeah,
they're similar,
Yeah.
but there is just enough differences that it does warrant having two separate stat blocks for them.
definitely. They should, they should
Yeah.
have some different abilities, even if the calculus comes out putting them at exactly the same CR. They should be mechanically distinct.
So what CR
Because
would
prime
we put them
servitors
at?
are really important.
Yeah, yes. Prime servitors keep the entire house alive. And what CR would we put them at? So if we're looking at Archon here at CR7 Major and Kel at CR9 Ultra, could a prime servitor beat up a Kel?
No.
No.
Okay, could a
I
prime
No.
don't think
servitor
so.
beat up an Archon?
My gut feeling is no, but I do feel like they could be quite similarly placed. It's a difficult question to answer. I don't think we've ever seen that kind of situation. Well, of course you wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, typically the Archons are working for the prime servitors.
So from the other end, we have a reference point that is timely and relevant, which is that, of course, Sepix is a prime servitor that we fight as a boss in a strike. But like we were talking about last time, that matchup is another instance of the, swole superhero guardian player character doing incredible feats of badassery that are not representative of typical guardian capabilities. So I don't know that we should actually give that one much weight in assessing how many guardians of what kind of level would it take to crack a prime servitor. But it is a point of reference.
So maybe the question to ask first, though, is going to be what is the classification that we would put a prime servitor at? And just as sort of a quick rundown, classification is a way of saying how many copies of that monster it takes for it to be at the given rank that it's at. So if you have a CR1 minion, it takes 8 of those monsters to be at rank 1. If there's less than that, then they are less than rank 1. So individually, they're very weak monsters. And then it goes from the minion to the soldier, which takes 4 monsters. The elite takes 2. A major takes 1. And ultra, you have to kind of flip that distinction on its head. Because on ultra, it's not how many copies of the monster, it's what's the minimum level the players need to be to make this a viable fight. Not a fair fight, just a viable fight. Because the Ultra's going to be overpowered as hell. And they are going to be your end boss.
So I'm looking for feedback on whether or not this is an appropriate placement, but I kind of am inclined to say that prime servitors, like Kells, being singular highest status members of Elixni houses, should be ultras, and pilot servitors should be a class below them in major, and maybe even at the same CR, or maybe even the pilot servitor is 1 CR higher as a major than the pilot servitor is as an ultra. But does that make any kind of sense?
I mean, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Because Ultra creatures do have access to a bunch of fun stuff that majors don't have access to.
Yeah, exactly. So, because it's not like we were starting to say, it's if you look at fights over the course of Destiny where you go up against pilot servitors and prime servitors, mechanically, those orbs are very similar in how they themselves can fight. But the prime servitor, in the way we're going to want to mechanically distinguish the two, it's not necessarily that it's just a yet stronger big servitor, but that it does different things than a pilot servitor, and it has different support.
I guess I was thinking more that the prime servitor would be under the major column. I know that there are some prime servitors that have been especially notable, but I don't mind too much really if it's under ultra or major. And well, I guess if it's under major, I think I'd also put pilot servitor under major. Don't think I would say a pilot servitor was elite, but yeah, I'm okay with either. I think prime servitor could be major or ultra, but I don't know if I'd put them in that same classification as a Cal.
So, the way that we can probably handle this and answer this question of major or ultra for prime servitor and that would be to turn to Sepix Prime and say, is Sepix Prime an outlier of servitors?
In what sense?
In the sense of, is Sepix Prime particularly special enough? Because Sepix Prime being one of the boss characters of Destiny, it's probably going to end up in the Ultra category. We have Sepix Prime on our list here, but he's a little bit of a ways down. So, I mean, yeah. Because if Sepix Prime is an average servitor, average Prime servitor, and we put Sepix Prime in the Ultra column, then it makes sense to put the Prime servitor in the Ultra column. But if Sepix Prime is an outlier or particularly powerful, then it would make sense to put the Prime servitor, the macro level stat block, in the major column, and then our micro level, which is Sepix Prime itself, in the Ultra column.
It's been a long time since I played Devil's Lair in D1, and we're going to return to it soon in D2. So we'll
a week after recording this.
Yeah, next week is Season of the Chosen at time of recording. So we're going to revisit Sepic's individual combat abilities up close and personal quite soon. But my recollection is that Sepix might be a more combat-capable Prime Servitor than your typical Prime Servitor, perhaps in part because it's been extensively modified by the House of Devils, and it's got all those spiny bits on it, and
it's just mean and rude.
But that's a vague impression, and I'm also thinking, on the other hand, like, what does it actually do in that fight that's any different than other big servitors do in fights against big servitors, right?
I was just looking through some of the other Prime servitors, and now again, I know that this was the player guardian, the young wolf, but like the wolf's Prime is one that you fight in a story mission. It's just a one-on-one. It's not a strike boss. I mean, I think I'm okay with putting it under Ultra. To be honest, I think that's fine. Like, I don't think there are that many Prime servitors that we can kind of draw on. So that's my thought.
All right, so let's get some numbers assigned to Prime or Pilot servitor. We already established that a Kel could beat up a Prime servitor, so the Prime servitor should be under the Kel, right?
Yes, so, yeah.
Alright, so then, did we ever answer the question, could an Archon beat up a Prime servitor?
No.
Not definitively, but, like, it's kind of a weird question, because, an Archon, like we were talking about last time, Archons aren't necessarily expert combatants. They're just well-fed, well-equipped, strong Fallen. And maybe they can fight good, but they don't necessarily have to fight good to be Archons.
All right. So we could...
Like, if an Archon decided it wanted to beat up a Prime Servitor, it would have, like, all of the tools it uses to maintain servitors and could, like, unscrew all its bolts or something.
So, what if we took Prime Servitor and we put this at CR8 Major, so it is both one rank below Kel and a classification below Kel. And then Pilot Servitor, I'm thinking they mostly just have their size going for them, and the only Pilot Servitor that was ever really much of a challenge was Calyx Reborn, which was, meant it was a Pilot Servitor turned into a Prime Servitor. And then I think actually the Ether events are Pilot Servitors, which just goes to show kind of how weak they are. Because half the time it's me screaming at the blueberries to stop shooting it so we could get the heroic version going on here, folks. Come on.
Those servitors are at least of a generally comparable class to Pilot Servitors, even if they're not strictly speaking Pilot Servitors themselves.
Then could 2 Fallen Captains beat up a Pilot Servitor? 2 captains, could they team up and beat up a Pilot Servitor?
I guess if they had shock swords, they could carve it up a fair bit. I feel like it would be tough.
It'd be tough.
Not necessarily because the servitor could fight back so well, but just because, like we discussed about, basic servitors, their strength is really in their defensive capability. And a pilot servitor, as a large, round boy, has a lot of armor, has a lot of defensive, quality in its basic design. So like, it's not necessarily that it could outfight two fallen captains, but I think they might have a hard time just like with the physical activity of carving it up.
Yeah.
So if we
Also, for the
go ahead.
record, I really wish that there was a pirate servitor.
A
Oh,
pirate servitor? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
With just
With
an
an
eye
eye
patch.
Just an
An
eye
eye
patch.
patch
One
over
eye.
its one eye. Yes.
Yeah.
That would be great.
All right. So if we put Prime at CR8 major, Pilot at CR6 major, and then we could take something like Sepix Prime, because if we skip ahead a little bit and grab Sepix Prime from our special monster list, it just feels right to make Sepix an ultra creature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could a Kel beat up Sepix, your average Kel?
I think that would be a tough fight.
So
I think it would be a tough fight, but who would win? Because
Well, that's the thing. I think it'd be a pretty even odds.
yeah,
It's like Kel might have a really, schmancy Scorch Cannon or whatever, but Sepix Prime can teleport all over the place, has all this,
yeah.
spiky bits. I
Slam
keep
you
ascribing
into a
some
wall.
extra combat effectiveness to Sepix's spiky bits, but honestly, I don't know what any of those things do.
I think they're supposed to be like antennas or something. Maybe they
Yeah,
just look
probably.
cool. So we could put Sepix at the same level as a Kel, or even one above.
I'm
We can also
I'm
come back to Sepix.
well, no, I think it's a good idea to place Sepix while we're talking about, generic prime servitors. I'm inclined to push him up if you think we can, because, I'm looking at the table we're building here, and right now we have kind of a nice curve for the CR and classification of the Elixni monsters that goes from, Dregs and Shanks at CR1 minion in the corner over to Kel at CR9 Ultra. But the system allows for player levels up to 20, and I want to make sure there are things
Oh, there will be things.
we have that are crunchy for higher level players. And I guess, if somebody's running a campaign that goes long enough that their player guardians get above level 10, then they're probably going to invent worse monsters for them to fight.
Speaking of player monsters, if you imagined a fire team of 4 guardians that were all at the same level, what level would those guardians have to be for it to be a fair fight against Sepix Prime?
Definitely at, the expert level we were discussing last time, somewhere in the middle of the level progression where they're accomplished.
Sepix Prime is probably somewhere around a CR10 Ultra.
Yeah,
Because if it's a fair fight down here at the 13th, 14th level, then, because again, Ultra, you have to flip it on its head a little bit. Like, this is the minimum level you should be before encountering this creature.
Yeah, you're not, and as we talked about with Kells, if you're putting your fire team up against Sepix, you're not going to just like find Sepix chilling by itself in a bathrobe or something. It's going to be surrounded by ads and other backup.
It's a great image.
At the hookah
So
bar.
first,
Anyways,
with an eye patch, and now a servitor in a bathrobe.
No, it's got the lime. It's got a giant lime over its eye.
Yeah.
God.
Servitor spa.
Let's talk about the next monster on our list here, the Fallen Walker or Spider Tank, however you want to call it.
Yeah. So
where are we
there
plopping this bad boy?
obviously there are a few variations of it, but I guess on the macro level, you see, I kind of feel like this is something that's like maybe it's a really low CR level ultra. It's either going to be in the major or the ultra column because it's so. I think it's a really unusual thing to see too. Well, actually saying that,
Yeah,
the heroic event,
the heroic
yeah,
Fallen Armory event, you get 2 spider tanks.
you do.
I kind of like the idea of it being a low CR ultra, but seems like we could be justified at also making it like a decent CR elite.
Yeah, but I feel as though.
Let me ask this question. Could a walker one-shot a Kel with that main cannon?
I don't
What
think
can
so.
survive that main cannon?
what can survive? I would say Sepix Prime. I would say a Kel probably could. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to.
See, I would say like if we were in the video game, a Kel could tank a direct hit from a spider tank main cannon. But I think in the less video game mechanical world of Destiny where we live when we're actually playing the game, and the sort of wider narrative setting of Destiny that we explore in Grimoire and lore tabs, I think like that's one of the largest pieces of ordnance we ever encounter.
Yeah.
Like that and
And
the Goliath.
yeah, and Kells are strong and they have good armor and stuff, but that main cannon is not an anti-personnel weapon. That's like a artillery piece, and I think it would punch straight through a Kell.
Equally, though, we have many instances where we fire multiple rocket launchers. Like, no, I know a rocket launcher is not as powerful as the Walker cannon, but there are instances where, the young wolf, and I know it depends on the Kell, but where we'll fire multiple rockets at a Kell before we can take them out.
Solarburn, Gallahorn, Skolas.
Mm.
And then the equally fun Arcburn not Thunderlord, Fourth Horseman Skolas. But anyways, getting off topic there.
I mean, I guess it's just if like the way that we beat spider tanks is not by absorbing the blast from the tank. We would avoid being hit by it. We would shoot its weak points, and then when it's damaged, we do damage to its bigger weak point. And that's exactly like Kells are good warriors. They're good fighters, and they can dodge. Like all of the big fallen dudes can do this like teleport type thing.
They got the blink and they got the thunder stomp.
Yeah, so
that's a good point. If we're talking about Kell versus Walker, do we mean like can a Kell single-handedly defeat a Walker tank, or do we mean can a Kell just like square up and eat an artillery shot? Because those are very different questions, and I feel pretty strongly that we should not say a Kell can just shrug off a direct hit from a Walker cannon. But I think Baxter is correct that a Kell probably could single-handedly fight a Walker tank and win.
Okay, so that question I did ask because that was going to help determine whether it goes into Elite, Major, or Ultra category. If a Kell cannot, shrug off a Walker artillery shot, if most things can't shrug that off, the Walker is going to belong in the Ultra category, because that will afford us the damage to make that shot feel like an artillery shot. But then if a Kell can beat a Walker in one-on-one combat by, as Baxter said, kind of how we do it, which is you dodge that shot, you don't let it hit you, and you take down the weak points. To me, it sounds like the Walker is a little bit of an inverse of the Servitor, whereas a Servitor is, most of its CR ranking comes from its defenses rather than its offenses. The Walker, most of its CR ranking is coming from its offensive ability, not necessarily from its defensive ability. Even though they are, tanks and designed for war, there is going to be some defensive ability in there.
But they do have very obvious design flaws.
They do have some very obvious design flaws. I'm going to suggest...
Let's make the weak spots glow.
Yeah, they gotta stop doing that. Really, Fallen.
I mean, I hope they don't, because it makes the game a lot easier.
But I'm going to suggest putting the Walker at the CR5 Ultra then.
Okay, yeah.
Because then that would make a good boss for early game.
Yeah, which is what it should be.
Yeah.
And even still being an Ultra creature, when you get up into the higher levels, the base Walker is still going to be a bit of a threat. And when you start getting up into 11th, 12th, 13th level, that's when you're going to start encountering some of the iterations of the Walker that are more threatening.
Now, in terms of our anchor monster, the captain at CR5 Elite, if the captain is a CR5 Elite and the Walker is a CR5 Ultra, how does that come out in terms of captains comparing to Walkers? Does that mean like two captains versus one walker would be a tough but nominally fair-ish fight, or what?
It would be two captains versus one walker. The battle is going to be in favor of the walker, but the captains stand a chance.
I think that feels right, because I can, imagine the grimoire card about two badass captains who really push it and manage to, with their amazing teamwork and
coordination, and also
yeah,
how
whatever,
much big gay love they have for each other.
Yeah, exactly. To save each other's lives because of their earlier enemies to lovers dynamic in a different grimoire card.
Oh, fuck yeah. Hell yeah, let's do it. When can I expect this on my desk?
When we add a Patreon tier for this kind of story content.
I'll talk to the I was gonna say I'll talk to the investors. We don't have investors. I'm sorry, we don't.
I like that you went
me
there,
going
though.
and talking to my cat. But
Meow.
all right. So Walker's CR5 Ultra. We have two more fallen to put on this list, and that is going to be the Baron and the Heavy Shank.
Big Shank.
Big Shank.
Since we're talking about machines.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's do Heavy Shank. The average Shank is a minion creature. So the Heavy Shank is this, I feel like it should be a soldier or an elite. I don't know if it should be a major.
I think not, because even though often you do see only one big shank at a time, you do not uncommonly see two at a time.
Yeah.
And since we also have the granddaddy of the heavy shank to account for, Saber 2,
yeah,
we should leave some higher room for that one. So I think elite is fine if that's the highest we're going to look at.
So if we're going to do an elite, that means there's two of them. And if there's two of them on the field, what level should the Guardians be for it to be a fair fight? The 4 Guardians that go up against them.
I'm just trying to think where heavy shanks are used. They're used fairly sparingly, really.
And they have, really nasty repeater guns on them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're shielded.
And the Vanguard put out a hit on a heavy shank. So one of the wanted bounties is a heavy shank. It's like there's a wanted bounty. It's like imagine the U.S. government putting out a wanted poster for a fucking Roomba. You know?
Oh, you mean one of Spider's bounties?
Yeah, one of Spider's bounties.
Yeah.
God. Anyways, they're apparently good enough to get wanted bounties about them, too.
Yeah, they can be dangerous.
I mean, I would probably put... Like, thinking about how rarely you see them and how much damage they are capable of, I think if they're going to be in the elite column, I'd probably put them above like a higher CR than Fallen Captain.
I could see it being higher than Fallen Captain, but I don't actually see it being that much higher. I would actually see it being maybe CR6, because remember, we have the Pilot Servitor as a CR6 major. So if we put this at CR6 Elite, we are saying it takes 4 Guardians at 6th level to take on 2 Heavy Shanks. And we are also saying 2 Heavy Shanks can take on 1 Pilot Servitor.
I mean, I feel like 2 Heavy Shanks. Yeah, I actually feel like it could be higher than that even. I feel like 2 Heavy Shanks.
Oh, now we're going to put the heavy... Because at this, if we put it much higher than here, we're going to start saying it's comparable to a walker, 2 heavy shanks.
Yeah, I think like, they can be formidable because they have those rapid-fire guns, but they're not that heavily armored.
I definitely wouldn't say that 2 heavy shanks are comparable to a walker, but... I also feel as though, with the Walker being in the Ultra column, does that not boost it up a little higher than, it's not just CR5,
So that Walker would end up probably coming out somewhere around CR8 or CR9 as its individual CR, and then it'll be listed as the CR5 Ultra, which is, minimum viable level for engaging with it.
I feel like Heavy Shanks being at a higher CR than the Walker is representative of the fact Heavy Shanks have armament that could damage a Walker, but the walker being an ultra with that artillery on it could really just blast them if it gets a hit on a heavy shank. Like,
Yeah.
All right. So we want them in the elite column. We want them above fallen captain. Do we want them comparable to a prime servitor, or are we leaving them here at CR6 elite?
I feel like they're okay there for now, and if
Yeah.
we end up feeling like there's some adjustments to make, we can consider.
I mean, I have mixed feelings, but I have no objections to them.
It might be easier to start placing some of these monsters as we start filling in other factions as well, because we'll be
Yeah.
able to compare a lot more. And it's mostly just going to get a lot more complicated as this podcast goes on. So our last fallen creature to add here is going to be the Baron.
Well, wait, should we put Saber 2 in here?
Oh, we can put Saber 2 in here. Yeah, we can go grab that and dump that in here.
Yeah.
Major or Ultra?
I would think it was an ultra personally, but I'd be happy with
forms.
either. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Do we need it to be an ultra to do the multiple forms?
It would be easier to do that as an ultra, because one of the defining mechanics of ultras is that they have multiple hit point pools, and when you reduce 1 to 0, they get to interrupt the current turn and perform their ultra action, which for Saber 2, I imagine being that form shift.
Okay, so how about this? It's an ultra, but it's an ultra at a CR below the walker.
So it's like a CR4, CR3 ultra?
Yeah, I feel like 4, but maybe 3.
All right, so a fire team of level 3 guardians. It'd be a tough fight, but, if they were smart and got lucky, it'd be a doable fight.
I don't agree with that. I guess I just thought that it's like, obviously I wouldn't put Saber 2 with a Kel or Sepix Prime, but I guess I just was thinking that it would be on the other side of the walker, that it might be tougher than an average walker, Well,
so here's a related question. How much of the difficulty of the Fallen Saber strike is not actually a function of Saber 2 itself, but of the numerous and aggravating environmental hazards that
the sniper
lead
shanks
up to and surround it, right? Because
that's a very good point.
Most of the time when my memory of that strike is mostly dying because I got zapped by the room rather than being killed by Saber itself.
I fell into some sort of electric jacuzzi or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So imagine if we had dev tools and you could just put Saber to the shank alone in an arena and shoot at it without all the zapping and without all of the sniping support.
Yeah.
How much harder would it be to fight in a vacuum than a walker?
Yeah, I think you've made a persuasive argument. I would be willing to have Saber maybe at 3 or 4 like you had it.
I think 4 feels a little better than 3, so that we're not bumping it down too many pegs. And of course, just like the walker, you're not gonna fight Saber 2 just by itself.
Yeah.
Since it's an ultra.
All right. So Saber 2 is a CR4 ultra, which means we've got the Fallen Baron to place here. And right off the bat, I am going to contest that the Fallen Baron should be a CR7 elite, which would mean 2 Barons can beat up an Archon for the Archon's lunch money and take the servitor and run away.
I mean, that doesn't sound wrong. And the only reason I would say a Baron should be a major is just that they're likely to only ever show up one at a time. But that doesn't necessarily have to define what category we put a monster in, does it?
Yes and no. So they can, yes, the elite category does mean that you are balancing it assuming there are 2 of those monsters, but there's another facet to this that I haven't really talked about before now, because this is where it starts to get down to you get the macro and then you get the micro, and now we're on the micro level here, which is you can swap in other monsters to fill that gap. It doesn't have to be a fight versus 2 Barons. It could be a fight versus 1 Baron and another CR7 elite, and you just put them together as one unit. Or it could be the Baron plus 4 or 2 CR7 soldiers, and together they would fill that whole slot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if the Baron is appearing with its crew more often than not, that crew can fill that missing slot next to it, which is why I think it would be good in the elite category instead of the major category.
Yeah, I think that is well argued.
It's either that or we put it as the same as Archon. They're both CR7
Yeah, I mean that was
majors.
going to be my counter suggestion.
That was
if
going to be
anything.
mine as well, actually. Well, before you suggested the CR7 Elite, I was going to say, to me, a Baron and an Archon, their only real difference is the role that they play within Fallen society. But if we're talking about the diversity of levels for the game, then I think it's fine to put it at CR7 Elite.
All right, so I'm going to put it the CR7 Elite for now. This is probably one that we might come back to, because we also have, I don't think, do we have any more fallen bosses? I mean, we got Tannix. You want to talk about Tannix and his 12 different forms?
No. I feel like that's too complicated.
We'll come back to Tannix. We'll circle back to you, buddy.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up the Fallen then, or the big players from the Fallen to deal with the Dregs and the Shanks and all that fun stuff. We kind of have to decide now which faction do we want to move on to next. Do you want to do Hive, Vex, or Cabal?
Baxter, you're our guest. You should pick who's your favorite.
Oh no, I couldn't possibly decide. I mean, I am fascinated by where we would put some of the Hive characters.
Well, who do you want to try to put first? What has
your
your biggest fancy?
Before I finish that, okay. I just want to say, because the thing is, with the Fallen, they are very like terrestrial. They're probably the most similar race to humans in a lot of ways. The Hive are like weird death cult space moths, and the Vex are like, obviously time traveling like viruses in a lot of ways. And I actually feel like the Cabal would be the most, how do I put this? I feel as though going through the Cabal next might be if you imagine, you can see there's like a diagonal line on the chart that we have at the moment for where the Fallen are. I feel as though the next logical line would actually be wherever we place the Cabal. So
because they're the next most conventional enemies.
Yes, the next least paracausal.
Well, careful what you say there, because we are getting another Cabal expansion.
Yes, that's true.
Season.
But I think with the exception of giant gooey white ghoul, the Cabal are pretty non-paracausal. They're pretty causal.
They're pretty causal?
Yeah.
All right. So we can head into Cabal next. I think we can get through the first three here of the Cabal at least: the War Beast, the Legionary, and the Phalanx.
Excellent.
I think the War Beast should be tougher than the Dreg.
Well, I was gonna say the War Beast is the reason D&Destiny exists. So
I mean,
you should give us your thoughts.
My thoughts is that good Martin, please stop me at any moment, and also if I make a huge fool of myself, please cut this part out when you do the editing later. War Beasts, they're constructed monsters, right? Like, they're specifically bred and made, and they are engineered to be what they are. Like, they don't have normal claws. They have slabs of metal shoved into their paws, and they have those tubes on their back. They're
definitely equipped in one way or another to be fighting animals, and there's no reason to think, especially with our knowledge of Cabal cloning capabilities, there's no reason to think they're anything but bred.
So,
maybe even completely engineered from.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, it's a science experiment, basically.
On the in the Leviathan raid, you have that encounter.
The psionic War Beast, right?
Yeah, the garden.
With the bad doggos.
Yeah, but the pleasure gardens. The loyalist war beasts, and they're slightly different,
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they
Like,
got
oh,
the
You
like,
the
think
glowing eyes and the
yeah.
you
tentacle
think those
thingies.
are the, naturally occurring species that the Red Legion cloned the war beasts from?
I think that even the ones that you see on the Leviathan are different than, they're called loyalist war beasts, so that makes me think that they have already done something to them. I feel like Callus may have been more interested in retaining some of the original features. This is all. I don't think there's any law. There's no reference I can point to verify any of that. That's just my guess.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna postulate this. Not affiliated with Bungie. I don't know what any of their lore Bible says. I think the War Beast is a completely engineered pet project, and part of the engineering is to create a creature that can be modified in different ways. Similar to how we modified human dogs for different purposes, we bred them over generations. It's just that instead of them breeding the dogs for that, they would hop up into the code of the DNA up on their computer and tweak things until they got the breed of dog they wanted and produce that dog.
Yeah.
That's just where I think it
Yeah.
comes from. And until Bungie tells me otherwise, I'm rolling with it. So, that all said, I do think that the War Beast itself is significantly more powerful than a Dreg. I do still think it is in the minion column, but I would put it
Mm.
at like CR3, which for context would be 8 War Beasts, would be a fair fight for 4 Guardians who are all at 3rd level. And at 3rd level, the Guardian has just enough experience in the world that they can cast their super now. And again, do
Yeah.
not count the super as part of the balance. The whole point of the super is that they can kill things tougher than them with it.
Mhm.
But that's how much experience the Guardian has, or the fire team has.
I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, I think that's fine. I would have put it a little lower myself, but I do think that when you think of the Red War and the arrival of the Red Legion as opposed to the Cabal that we saw in Destiny 1, I do think that the War Beasts are supposed to be more powerful than Dregs and Shanks. Yeah.
Let's leave Warbeast at CR3 minion.
Okay.
And let's talk about Legionary. Because depending on where we
Yeah.
put Legionary, we might edit where we put Warbeast.
I think legionaries. I'm just trying to remember. Like I feel as though they are probably. Well, I would put them as soldier probably, but I mean, I guess they could fall under minion. Well, are they more powerful than a war beast? I think they probably are.
If only by virtue of being very
Bipedal
big
with a
and
gun.
heavily armored.
Beefy boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I'm just feeling. I feel like you could be swarmed by war beasts. Whereas if we said that legionaries were soldiers, that means 8 war beasts versus 4 legionaries. If they were the same CR level, that would be a fair fight.
Yes.
But I think in that situation that the legionaries would do a lot better than the war beasts.
Alright, so, I mean, if we put Legionary in soldier column, what level would a Guardian fire team, 4 Guardians versus 4 Legionaries? So we're basically looking at 1-to-1. If we're putting Legionary versus Guardian, what level would the Guardian be for that to be a fair fight?
Maybe, well, I don't know, maybe around level 4? What do you think?
I'm I'm thinking back to the Destiny 1 missions where you first go to Mars
Mm-hmm.
and where you're told that
That's true, yeah.
800 pounds of
there
muscle.
yeah,
Yeah.
that there's no Guardian presence on Mars at the time because the Cabal stranglehold on their
Mhm.
exclusion zone is unbreakable.
Okay,
And
so
that
maybe
they're
I'm underestimating your average legionary.
well, but then again, later on you get the Cabal intelligence report about Guardians showing up, just decimating various squads, like dancing, doing sparrow tricks, and then like leaving, and the Cabal being just totally unable to deal with them.
Yeah.
And if I were writing for Destiny and I had to reconcile those different impressions of the relation between the Cabal and Guardians, I would probably point to the time that elapses between each of
Mm.
those points in the story, and the fact that the traveler begins to heal and everybody's light actually grows stronger between the time that the young wolf breaks the exclusion zone and later Cabal intelligence is griping about Guardians doing sparrow tricks and wiping out their patrols.
So basically, after the Guardians take care of the darkness in the Black Garden, that section of it at least,
Yeah.
is when the Cabal start to have trouble with the Guardians.
Yeah, I mean,
I think part of it as well, in that card where it describes the difficulty that the Cabal have with Guardians, it also says that like part of it is that their tactics and their strategies aren't well suited for fighting.
yeah,
You know, like Guardians work on an individual level. It's like fighting an army of ninjas. You know, like not even an army. It's like fighting a small number of
Teenage
like.
Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, like the Cabal are very well set up for fighting another army. They're
yeah,
not very well set up for fighting individual agents that can infiltrate their bases and cause havoc and then get out before they can really respond.
yeah.
So that might be another explanation rather than. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not that the light level increased over time. I'm just saying that on top of that, it could be that
It's a
Cabal aren't.
strategic problem,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
not just a brute force problem. Which brings me back in my thinking to a proposition, which is I think the CR should be 4.
Okay.
Because if we think of it as a brute force thing, just put them up against each other in a straight fight, 3 or 4, but at least 3, because if we're thinking of like a newly risen guardian who hasn't mastered his super ability yet, if a handful of them run into, actually, if we're talking about soldier, it's 1-to-1, right? So if it's one guardian of that kind of, just getting the hang of being alive again, running into an 800-pound fully armored space rhino,
trained probably for at least a few years,
that guardian is going to get stomped. And it's going to be a story, the grimoire card for that is going to be about how this guardian got rezzed over and over and only eventually managed to tire out this lone legionary because the legionary couldn't keep the guardian dead.
Yeah, legionary couldn't get a hold of the ghost to finally end it.
Exactly.
So it was a war of attrition.
So
that makes sense to me.
So if it's at the soldier class, then CR3 or 4, and I guess it could go either way in terms of which CR, depending on how we feel about where it fits in context.
All right, and then phalanxes. I'm pretty sure those are just legionaries that have been trained with the shield.
That
so
is
they're
correct.
not too different.
Are we going to have a separate CR level for the shield?
I was thinking maybe bring them just fucking yeah. The shield is like a CR30 Ultra itself, and if it hits you're going to space.
It's the home run bat from Smash Brothers.
It is. It's the home run bat. I was gonna suggest putting Phalanx as an CR4 elite, because there's not a whole lot of difference between them and the legionary, except the Phalanx has been trained a bit more and is a bit more specialized, and that's typically what the elite column is for. Creatures that have a bit more training or a bit more specialized knowledge in something.
But would you say that an individual legionary is similar in capabilities and abilities to an individual phalanx? If I guess I'm just worried that if they're both CR4, like a soldier is effectively like half as powerful as an elite. Does that mean a phalanx is twice as powerful as a legionary?
It means that 2 legionaries is the equivalent of 1 phalanx.
Yeah, I think that. I would say that if the phalanx is an elite, then it should be like CR3 or CR2.
Counterpoint, I know we joked about it, but the shield does matter. You know,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're going up
it
against
does.
two people, but you have a shield
Yeah.
that is the size of your body, you can block one off at least at all times.
And
I
I
guess
can,
I'm okay with it being a CR4. I don't think a phalanx is twice as good as a legionary.
well, but what about reframing the comparison, right? Like imagine you have two legionaries in a fight against one phalanx. It's not necessarily about whether the phalanx can punch
Yeah,
out
but
That's just an
both
even
legionaries,
fight.
but you would need the two legionaries to like tactically overcome the barrier of the shield, right? In order to beat that one phalanx.
yes, but and I think that they would every time. I think
Hmm.
two legionaries would beat a phalanx every time because a phalanx's shield can only point in one direction.
That's a good
And
point.
all of the cabal can jump over each other, so
Yeah.
immediately the phalanx shield is effective, but the way similar to with the walker, the way that guardians get around it is either by, you know, a lot of the time it's because again there's a big shiny weak spot on it, which is a really bad idea, or or that we just jump over it, you know.
Shoot him in the foot.
Okay, what can
Yeah.
you jump 8 feet straight up in the air?
Yes.
Well, but
We
legionaries,
we can.
Well, I mean,
Hello.
guardians can, yes, but a legionary could not.
but they have
They
those
have a jump
jetpacks.
pack.
Okay, fine, yeah,
No,
sure, but they
I
got the
think
jump
Baxter has a good
packs.
point, which is that so I think it would take two legionaries to beat a phalanx, but Baxter's right that two legionaries almost always would beat a phalanx. Because how does the one phalanx
Yeah,
win against the two legionaries?
I mean, I think I'm like I said, I'm perfectly happy to leave it where it is at CR4, but I just don't think that two legionaries versus one phalanx is ever a fair fight. I think the two legionaries will pretty much always win that fight.
So then
So could we
CR4
put it
soldier.
at, well, could we put it at CR3 elite?
Well, then we're saying that if you start as a legionary, like if you imagine you signed up for Cabal, whatever, you start as a legionary, and then you get the phalanx training, and that makes you weaker.
No, but it
I
doesn't
mean,
make you weaker because the soldier means you have to kind of divide the CR level by 4. So that means if there's 4 legionaries, they're worth like 1 CR each. If the phalanx is CR3 elite, then that one phalanx is worth like 1.5 CR. Do you know what I mean?
It
in
gets a
an
little
abstract
wonky.
way.
I mean, I
I
get
Yeah,
what
get
you
what
mean.
you're saying.
I know I know you can't put it in such simple terms, but to me, just because somebody gets a shield, that doesn't automatically mean that, you know, I think that generally people are going to move up CR levels definitely, but I just think when we're comparing these two, like legionary and phalanx to each other.
I just know from
Mhm.
past experience that if the phalanx goes at CR3 elite, even though it is an elite, the majority of the feedback on it is going to be, why would something be weaker than the weakest unit in the military? Because then at that point, we are saying that the phalanx is the weakest unit in the military.
Well, isn't the answer to that, especially in light of the tiers that we have in this chart, in addition to just CR rank, that, you know, CR does not correspond in a uncomplicated linear fashion to increasing strength. You know, it's kind of a
Yeah.
amalgamated measure of difficulty.
That's definitely how I've been viewing it in my head because to me, every time we put somebody in a column, like this is just my mathematician brain. Like whenever we put somebody in a column, I'm dividing by the number. So if it's a major, I don't divide by anything. If it's an elite, I divide it by 2. If it's a soldier, I divide it by 4. If it's a minion, I divide it by 8. And so to me, an individual legionary is at CR4, because they're a soldier, I'm dividing that by 4. The elite, if there's a phalanx at CR3, I'm dividing that by 2. So that means an individual legionary is 1, an individual phalanx is 1.5. That may not work in the way that you're thinking about it, but to me, it's perfectly logical for a
I
legionary
see
to be.
All right,
the same kind of
Yeah.
relationship.
I'm gonna
But
put.
listen, it seems like, Kitty, it seems like you have some real reservations about this.
No, I'm just
I'm
here's the.
I'm also okay with phalanxes also
Yes.
being CR forest soldiers
Yeah,
right
me
next
too.
to legionaries, because like I don't actually see phalanxes as a higher rank or higher strength unit than the legionary in terms of the Cabal military. They're just slightly specialized
'Cause
in a different way.
I was going to say, Baxter, you're not wrong. Your interpretation of this is not wrong. You just have to also consider the units as a whole. A whole unit of phalanx. When you put them at a lower CR than the legionaries, you say a whole unit of phalanx is worth less than a whole unit of legionaries.
Yes,
I mean,
and that to me makes sense because a whole unit of phalanx is 2 phalanx, but a whole unit of legionaries is 4 legionaries, you know?
yeah, and 4
Okay.
legionaries would outfight 2 phalanxes.
I'm gonna
Uh,
trust you guys with this. And if
Why do I feel like we're gonna get blamed for something down the line?
I don't know, I'm
yeah.
just gonna but also just wanted to double check that if we do put the phalanx as a CR3 elite, we are putting them on the same line as a sniper vandal.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I think. I don't know, but I think.
Because, well, Sniper Vandal has the precision to just get around the shield from range.
So that'd be one phalanx versus one vandal. It'd basically be a 50-50 fight.
Yeah, either the Vandal has the shot and can take out the Phalanx from a distance, or the Phalanx gets close and the Vandal's in a bit of trouble.
All right, so that I think is where we're going to leave off for today, which means next week we'll be coming back to finish up the Cabal. We got, fun things. We got the Centurion, the Scion, the Colossus, and we have a bunch of fun bosses too, which, oh god. Brachus Zahn, Valus to Arc. I don't think I put the mind flayers on here, but we could figure out the mind flayers. That would probably be a whole episode in and of themselves.
Wow.
Because there's a lot needed to talk about when it comes to the mind flayers and CR system, and we don't have anything for 3. As has been explained, we have 8, 4, 2, and 1. We don't have anything for 3. So that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
We'll chew on them when we get to it, I guess.
So thank you for listening to us today. We hope you learned something new. And if you want to continue the discussion of any of the monsters we talked about today, such as if you want to throw your hat into the ring about the phalanx and where the phalanx should go on the CR chart, feel free to let us know what your thoughts are down in the comments. A whole bunch of legal stuff. All right. Dungeons & Destiny is published under the Open Game License version 1.0a. It is a not-for-profit labor of love produced solely for entertainment purposes, and it contains works inspired by Bungie's video games Destiny and Destiny 2. You can find out more about the project, and you can help support the project by visiting DNDestinyproject.com. Bungie, Destiny, and all other related products referenced within this podcast are either trademarks or registered trademarks of Bungie Inc. or its suppliers. Dungeons & Destiny, and by extension Velvet Fang, is in no way affiliated with Bungie Inc., but we would love to be. Call us.
And while we're waiting for them to call, you all should go visit the Ishtar Collective.
Yeah. Go read up on the phalanx, Lauren. Come back to us. As always, thank you everyone. Make good choices and try not to die.